Get social with us. Follow us on Instagram at Goodtaste TV. Time for a shout out to our sponsors. In the unofficial world of deli greatness, Ziggy Gruber wears the triple crown. This owner and chef of the 25-year-old Kenny and Ziggy's New York delicatessen restaurant and bakery in Houston has run 3 very successful delis. He's the 3rd generation in his family to own a deli. And Texas is the 3rd U.S. coast where he's educated everyone on how life without a great deli is really no life at all. His triple wins have made him the #1 deli in the nation, and he's in Houston. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Good Taste for the Soul. I'm Tangi Patton. If you're an Aggie fan, the name Harvey Slocum means something to you big time. He's widely regarded as one of the winningest coaches of all time, one of the greatest. Well, his youngest son, John Harvey, has a survival story that's just as legendary. He was born with a congenital heart defect, had an open heart surgery at 22, which they thought corrected the problem. For the next 20 years, he had no heart issues until one fateful day playing golf in Midland. That day, he experienced what's known as instant cardiac death. For 13 minutes, he was legally dead. Very excited to share his story with all of you. One of the first things I wanted to ask you was, what was it like being the son of someone in your dad's position all those years at A&M, so loved and liked and respected? Was it tough?
It was an absolute, it had 2 sides. I'll say that it was a wonderful blessing. It was, being a coach's son, a lot of kids have to move. It's like being a military kid. You move all over, and I was so blessed. Dad was here the whole time. My whole life, he has lived in College Station, other than 1 year when I was a young child. He came to A&M, I think, in 1972 with Emory Billard. He left in 1980 and coached the 1981 football season at USC with John Robinson was his boss. They had Marcus Allen, who won the Heisman Trophy, so it was a great opportunity. And then the very next year, Jackie Sherrill came to A&M and hired Dad back to be his defensive coordinator and assistant head coach. So we came right back to College Station. So I think I was 4 or 5 years old, and I remember little bits and pieces of that, but for the most part, my life and really all of it has been, based around Texas A&M, and being raised in that was such a blessing. Just the people I got to meet, going to games, like, man, it was so much fun. And we were so good during those years. It was a blessing, but it was also trying. I was under the microscope constantly. Everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew who my family was. My parents, that caused some division. They had a long separation and kind of a long divorce because of a lot of that. My dad was so busy, and there's so much scrutiny and being in the public eye that there were some downsides to it that people didn't really see. But I, that happens to everybody. Everybody kind of has their deal, and it goes back. It's the Lord's story, and He brings us through everything. And so I don't want to sound negative about that at all. It was a blessing, but it was tough at times. The losses, the big losses, falling a game short of winning a national championship or a game short of winning a conference championship. Some of those things, it was so in the moment and such a big deal at the time. But
even as the child, you could feel
I mean, I can remember going to school and people being mad because we lost. It goes, those kids were watching their dads, right? Those kids' dads and grandparents had been Aggies, and they were so fired up. And why didn't your dad throw the football more? It's crazy. It's funny to see. I heard Jay Graham is a big A&M supporter and a wonderful friend of mine. And I spent time with him yesterday. Then it was funny. He told a story to some guys we were with that right after Kevin Sumlin, who had coached for my dad, became head coach, they were watching a game together, and they had run a play, and Jay said out loud, he said, "Dang, why didn't we run it? Why can't we run it?" And my dad made the joke. He said, "Jay, it was a few years ago when you were making that statement about me wondering why I didn't throw it." So you can't please all the people. And Dad always says, being a football coach is like being a politician. when you get the job, everybody loves you. And then no matter whether you win or lose, every year you start losing fans because you can never make everybody happy. So it's one of those jobs that's part of it. And it was a blessing. It was, and being in the sports world, even today, I have a brother that was a coach.
Yeah.
And so I've been very blessed in the sports world to be around, games and athletes and fun people. So it's been a blessing.
Well, you went in a different direction than football. You
Did.
chose golf. Was it because maybe of the attention and everything thrown at the football world that you wanted to do something different?
I was actually born with a congenital heart defect. And so when I was young, I didn't have the opportunity to play football. I would have loved to have done that. And there was a lot of my life where I thought I was still going to be a football coach. I've been in a lot of, I've probably been in more defensive football meetings and team meetings than anybody who's not in football. So, I would sit there. My dad, I spent a lot of time as a very young person with my dad, all through junior high, all through high school. Every day when I got out of school, I would go to the stadium and stay with him. So I have been in thousands of hours of football meetings and seen hundreds of thousands of plays, rerun and played over, back up, go forward. Dad would come home and he'd sit in his living room chair. Literally, we had a beta machine, if you remember what those were. It had a wired remote. And I remember I would be home watching TV. He'd get home from the office and literally come in. It'd be time to watch football. He'd sit there with that wired remote. I'd have to give him the remote, and he'd sit there and back him up and go forward, back him up and go forward.
So it was 24/7 football.
It was, and I thought that was going to be a part of my life. But as I got older, I was pretty good at golf and played golf in college, and so I wasn't a football coach, to be honest, because I like to play golf and I like to hunt too much, and football season is the wrong time of year. So I got out, and I love to build things. I had a construction company at the end of college and as a young adult. And that led me to get into the oil and gas business. So just, I say it all the time. I've said it a couple of times a day. It's God's plan, and my plan has become his plan, certainly through what I've been through. So
we're kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, we are.
For
and,
sure.
and it's been very fun. I've been very blessed.
Well, you and I met working on your wonderful restaurant in College Station, 1860 Italia. Right. And during the course, which by the way is wonderful, if you're in College Station, and you should know, I've had so many friends who saw the show and you guys on it and went and absolutely loved it. So it is a fabulous restaurant. But during that interview, you talked about an incident. Speaking of your heart issue, you were playing golf in Midland. Tell us about that.
I was. So my family and I did a short stint in Midland, and I was out there completely healthy. It was in 2019, April 28th of 2019. I was playing golf with some close friends of mine, had no symptoms. Still to this day, remember a few minutes before it happened, talking on the phone to my wife, Teresa, about pool chemicals, and I'd be home in a little while. And somewhere after that phone call, I told my buddies I didn't feel well, and I went and sat in the golf cart. And when they came off the green, they couldn't see me. Now, they gave me a hard time for walking off the green early. I guess I putted out and left them, kind of gave me a hard time between each other. But when they came over the hill, they said my chin was down on the steering wheel. They handed me a Gatorade, which I'll tell you, don't ever drink orange Gatorade. It'll kill you. I proved it. But they came over and gave me a Gatorade. They thought I was having a heat stroke. And I drank the Gatorade and then fell over, and I suffered instant cardiac death. So it wasn't related to my first problem, but because of the scar tissue on my heart, they think that I had started to have some atrial fibrillation, and I'd had bouts leading up to that. I'd had to be cardioverted several times for not coming out of atrial fibrillation, but they think that I had been in AFib maybe for a couple days and not noticed it. And because of the scar on my heart, it will create its own circuit around that scar. So the electrical pulses in my heart started kind of creating their own circuit, and then sent out erratic electrical pulses, and my ventricles shut off. So they called it instant cardiac death. So,
you're dead.
I was dead. So the guys called my wife and said, "We think John Harvey's having a seizure. What do we do?" And she said, "He doesn't have seizures. Call 911. So they immediately picked me up, and it was a blessing. They didn't try to perform CPR. They put me in a golf cart, drove me immediately to the clubhouse, and there was an ambulance waiting on me when I got there, and the paramedics had me for 13 minutes. No breath, no heartbeat, nothing. And
13 minutes?
13 minutes. It's incredible. They revived me. They put me in an induced coma for 4 days, cooled my organs down. They were worried about my organs shutting off for being that long without oxygen. The blessing in it is that I had no tissue damage there was no functional damage with my heart. So once they got it started, it was very strong to keep me going. But I woke up 4 days. I have a sister-in-law that's a doctor, and she was kind of the liaison between my family and wife and the doctors, and they thought I was very sick. They were very, very worried that I wouldn't be responsive, and obviously they thought I was going to be brain dead or have serious brain issues. And they woke me up 4 days later, and I knew everybody in the room, and they rushed. I'd been a patient at Texas Children's my whole life. I'm still there. I had my pacemaker replaced 2 weeks ago in Texas Children's, but they put me in an ambulance, took me to Texas Children's Hospital, put a pacemaker in and defibrillator. And I walked out of the hospital 1 week from the day I went in.
Wow.
It was amazing.
What did the doctor say? Because I would imagine 13 minutes, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Is it a flat line at that point?
The whole time was a flat line. I mean, I was in all definition of the words dead for 13 minutes. And so when they got me back, they thought it was a miracle that they revived me, much less with no damage. I mean, and I say today, I'm on borrowed time. I'm on the guy upstairs time, because it's the only way that could happen. It's an absolute miracle that I'm here and mentally capable. There's some people that would question my mental capacity anyway, but I'm still here, and I think I'm okay.
Did you have any, you hear of these near-death experiences and things like that. Do you recall anything at all, or were you just totally blacked out?
I didn't, and it's a funny story. So I was involved in a wonderful men's group in Midland. And so when I got healthy enough to leave the hospital, my dad and Teresa wanted me to come to College Station to heal. And so they brought me to College Station, and a few weeks went by. It may have been 3 or 4 weeks before I got to go back to Midland. But the first morning I walked into my men's group, from way across the room, I could see the gentleman that led it. He was a good friend of mine. He kind of came and separated everybody. He said, "This is odd," but he gave me a big hug. He said, "But I got to know, tell me what you saw." And I was like, "Kyle, I hate to tell you, it was totally dark." I said, "It wasn't hot." So I'm good. I've got time to work on it. So, but yeah, it from what I remember, it was totally black, and I don't remember anything. I remember vividly right before it happened. And what's crazy is I can remember waking up, and I couldn't wrap my hands around why I was there. I remember asking everybody that came in, why am I here? What happened? It took me an hour or two to kind of stop asking people why, but I remember, I have recollection of when I woke up. So it's crazy. I went on a little trip, and in the Lord's hand. Yeah, I'm back. So.
Well, I'm curious, you hear of people, I hear it a lot with open heart surgery or cancer, and they're cured, they're okay, that it was a life-changing event. Was this a life-changing event for you in any way, to be dead essentially for 13 minutes?
It was definitely a reevaluating moment. When I left the hospital, I never wanted, I don't know if you can see, but I've got a big whiteboard I keep in my office. And I've told you, we're in the process of moving, so I don't have everything filled out, but one of the words across the top is thankfulness. And this year, thankfulness is my word, but it's because of what happened. I was so thankful and so grateful when I walked out of the hospital that day, that I never wanted to ever forget that. And it was a rebalancing of life. It was certainly you evaluate everything and all your priorities. I'm still a sinner and still not perfect like everybody else, but it was definitely, it was something to make me stop and reevaluate, and really, it helped me live a lot more for others and a lot more for, what's really important. And my life today is a lot less about chasing dollars and a lot more about chasing men and teaching them, the peace and the grace of Jesus Christ, and how wonderful he is to us, and the miracles that he can perform, in our lives.
Absolutely. When did you become a Christian?
That's a crazy question. I have been a Christian my whole life. I have my mother and my father devout Christians, and even through all that we've been through, they've never wavered from that. And so I've known Christ my whole life. And there's never really, it's been kind of a gradual thing. Obviously dying had a big part of recommitment and focus. But, I'll say this, in my marriage, my life-changing event in my marriage, my wife and I got into our marriage, and when we met, she was kind of in chaos with her life. And we got married, and a month later we had a child. And I got into being an oil field salesman and traveling. So she was at home and she was grounded. She got baptized shortly after having our first child, Dylan, my daughter. And she's an unbelievably faithful woman. And I was not a great husband by any stretches of that. And one day she called me and she said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I love you. And when I married you, I made a commitment to the Lord. And I'm going to be here to honor that commitment. And when I die and go to heaven, I'm going to meet Jesus, and he's going to ask me, how did you love John Harvey? He's never going to ask me how John Harvey loved me." And she said, "I'm going to be able to answer that question." She said, "I hope you get to the point where you can answer that question also." And she said, "I love you and I'm here." And she hung up the phone. And it wasn't that instant, but that question and realizing that we're all going to do two things. We're all going to die and we're all going to meet Jesus. We're all going to be judged for what we've done and who we are. And I really, since that day, have lived to make sure that everybody I come across, when he asks me how I loved him, I can say I loved him, no matter what. So that was really at that moment when my life changed. It's been a while now. It's been 12, 15 years ago when that happened. So, it's been a blessing.
How did you decide to leave Midland and go back home for good?
That's the part I left out. So I told you that my dad and Teresa brought us back to College Station to heal. Well, what they didn't tell me until I asked is that they also sold my house when I was in a coma. So they sold my house.
In Midland?
Yeah, they did. So Teresa and I had our house listed, and we had talked to, and I don't know that it was listed. We had talked to an agent out there that she had gotten to know that was a friend of ours. And we had a beautiful house in a great area out there, and houses like that are hard to come by. Midland at the time, it since we've left, it's really grown. But we had a wonderful house that was, very marketable. So when that happened, they actually accepted an offer. We got more than an offering price. She had a buyer in her pocket. So they sold my house. Well, I give her a hard time all the time. They sold my house when I was in a coma. So it was good. But she and my dad, and they were right in the decision. They wanted me to get back closer to Texas Children's. At the time when it happened, we had no idea. I mean, it was an unbelievable event, and they had the long-term care. They had no idea what I was going to need and how often we were going to have to be there, and what the circumstances to come. So they got me back closer to there, and it's been great. We're home. Shortly after that, Johnny called and wanted to start 1860 Italia. So I couldn't get him to Midland, so at least I got him to College Station.
Well, it was interesting. I don't know if you remember in the interview, I'll try and remember to link it to this episode so people can watch it, about the restaurant. He talked about, he came to a point in his life that he was reevaluating, and coming together with you guys to do this restaurant seemed right to him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that was the impression I got.
No, well, Johnny lost a brother. It was a bad deal. Not to say negative things, but I think he had probably been dealing with a little bit of alcoholism, and he had an accident one night. He came home and I think fell in his bedroom, didn't realize that he had ruptured his spleen and had internal bleeding. And I don't want to, if the Poche family's listening, that's not exactly what happened. I apologize, but very similar, and just one of those accidents that it's just awful. It was an awful loss, and we all miss Brett big time. But they had lost a brother, and he was ready to make a change. He had been at Maggiano's and Brinker's for 21 plus years.
Houston?
He did spend some time in Houston, but he was in Dallas most of the time.
Okay.
Most of his career he spent in the Dallas area, in the Metroplex. He traveled for them quite a bit. at the end, but most of his life they had spent in the Dallas area. So he was ready to get back. He was raised in Baton Rouge and ready to get back to a smaller college type town. And so he and his family moved here right after that. And it was for both of us having each other and starting the restaurant. It was a good change in direction and a change of life for sure.
So we know of 2 lives that were changed.
For sure.
As a result,
Definitely.
in a big way.
Definitely.
Well, I should tell everyone that may be watching or listening, Johnny is the chef and partner in
he is. So
and he has his own restaurant. Well, you all do, but there's another restaurant with his name.
That's correct. So there's 3 of us. We have, when we were all hunting buddies, another childhood friend of mine that grew up with me in College Station, Jeremy Scott, who's dear friend to this day. We cornered Johnny on a bear hunt in Canada and said, if you ever do your own deal, we get first right of refusal to be your partners. And he honored that. When he moved, he called me and said, call Jeremy if y'all want to do it. So I said, we do. And so he's here, but it's been a blessing. But definitely Johnny deserves all the credit for 1860 and our Cajun restaurant Poche's, which has his name on it. We had a big dinner there last night, and he never ceases to amaze me at what he can do with food.
Oh,
he deserves all the credit.
Fun.
He is. He's a great guy, very charismatic, and an unbelievable chef.
Well, I remember when we were at 1860, your dad was there, and we were talking to him about your restaurant and on what he liked there. Was it lasagna? I can't remember what his favorite dish was.
I like lasagna. The lasagna is really good.
But he said he was impressed because he hadn't had to coach you very much.
But perhaps the most important Aggie customer is dear old Dad.
I've been really pleased that I haven't had to coach him any. They've done a great job.
Well, I don't know if that's true. He may have been gracious in saying that. I don't think the coaching part ever goes away. He's pretty good at it every time I see him. But yeah, I think in life you always try to make your parents proud of you, and I think I've succeeded in that. He's pretty proud of me, so it's fun.
Yeah, it showed. He was beaming. Well,
thank you. I'm as proud of him as he is of me. He was a very good teacher, and he's my best friend, and he's fun. It's great having. He was with us last night. It's great having him around. We've been very lucky. Most adults don't get to have the relationship that I've had. I mean, he pretty much raised me. He did a majority of the part of raising me, and then I left for a little while. But as a young adult, my wife and I also lived on our family ranch, so we got to be right after my dad left A&M. We got to be neighbors, and so we spent tons of time getting to be friends. And since I've been home the last few years, I get to see him dang near daily, and it's fun to be able to enjoy a dad and a role model and a friend all at once. He's been a wonderful role model for me. He's a heck of a man.
What life skills do you think you learned from him?
First and foremost, probably honesty and hard work. He always character probably. He always had a saying that it's good in, good out. He told and I would say this, he's been a father of hundreds of people, right? Like he had so many players. And I think if you ask any of them, they would know 2 statements of his: good in, good out. People you hang out with, the stuff you put in. If you put in bad stuff, you're going to get bad stuff out. If you put in good stuff, you're going to get good stuff out. And then also, it's not the bad things that happen to you in life, it's how you react to them. And I think those 2 things I would say every person, every player, anybody that he's ever been able to spend much time around would take those 2 things from him. And he lives by those. I mean, he's a great man of character, and those 2 things, without a doubt, those two statements, I think everybody that's had an opportunity to live and be around him would say that that's his deal. And he lives by it. He's a wonderful man, big Christian, and he's pretty good guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Enough.
And the thing about your dad, was he the longest coach ever at A&M?
I know that I know that he's the longest coach at A&M. I think he's coached in more A&M Texas games than any coach on either side of that. So he was there 72 to 2002 minus 1 year. So it was
a long run.
A lot of games. Yeah.
And it's interesting because sports fans in general, football fans too, are very, when things are good, they love it. And when things are
Oh yeah.
bad, they're quick to go back. But your dad endured good and bad. You know what I mean?
So in that, and most people wouldn't realize this, in that tenure, that, however many, 32 years or whatever it was, he walked out a winner. So he won more times than he lost that game, which most people wouldn't think. But he would. A&M, when they were an all men's school, they weren't good at football. Or they had some good years, but they weren't a recognized football program. They were a military school, and that was what was most important. And through the early 70s, they began to gain some momentum. And now it's amazing. I mean, their athletic facilities and their programs, I don't know that we've won to the potential yet, but it's amazing. That growth is still going. But he was involved in a major part of the catalyst of A&M athletics and really the university growth.
Well, and they just loved him through the wins, through the losses, obviously more wins than losses, but the character in him, I think, was so strong.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. He's the same guy no matter what. He can face adversity, with a stone cold face because that, one thing that I can say is that it's not, I can remember walking off the golf course and being so frustrated and just so down. And anybody that plays golf knows the feeling and how frustrating it makes you. But he would tell me, that's not who you are. So play golf and understand whether you play good or play bad, that's not who you are. And I think in his football games, when they got beat, he walked off the field and he knew that he had done everything he could. He and his teams had played hard, and you can't win. That's the joy of winning is understanding how bad defeat feels. And I think every time he walked off the field, he was confident that they had done things right. They had put in the preparation and they had tried their hardest. Whatever works out, works out. But you can go the next week and get better. And I think that's what he strived to do in everything in life. It wasn't, and it's not the bad things that happen. And it's not the losses. That's not who you are. Your character's who you are. Your faith is who you are. And that makes it easy to continue no matter what you face to move forward and grow and compete and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, so I put out a few texts yesterday. I used to work with some sports guys, of course, at the TV station. I don't know if you ever dealt with San Antonio sports guys, but I put some texts out and asked them what would they, if they knew anything that'd be a fun thing to share, or if they had questions. And then I did that to some of my Aggie friends too.
All right.
The number one question, the most common from everybody, was, what was it like being the son of a strong leader like R.C. Slocum?
It was great. It was an invaluable experience. I think, and we all know coaches who have won and not been a great character. And there's people like that in all facets of life. He won and he was a great character. He did it the right way. And he that's who he was. And I think he would tell you there were moments when he could have made other decisions that might not have been the right thing to do to win more games. And he wasn't willing to do that. And so I think now at 80 years old, that's one of his, the things he's most proud of is that he did it the right way. And the players that played for him, you'd be shocked on Father's Day or Christmas how many text messages he gets and what a father figure he was to so many men and what a role model he was to so many men because he was that way. And that no win can ever make up for the gratitude that those people have towards him, just showing them, being the right kind of person.
The what's in your soul, the heart, the love he had. And
caring. When you stand in the mirror, right? Being able to look in the mirror and look at those eyes on the other side and know that you were true to yourself, that's an important thing. So
absolutely. And there's no undoing it when you're not.
That's correct. That's correct.
The other question I got, everyone to a T, who was his favorite player?
Oh, that's hard. There's so many. There's so many because it was so long. I mean, he has, I would not be fair and I would forget some, but you go back, Jacob Green. So I'll say this, Jacob Green, who was, I think, his first All-American at A&M. I may be wrong, but Jacob was we call him son number one. So when Dad had cancer a couple of years ago, my office was in Houston at the time, and I was driving from College Station to Houston. Dad was fighting cancer, so I called to check on him. And Nell, my stepmother, said he was taking a nap. And you find that weird at 9:30 in the morning that your dad's taking a nap. You worry about him. So he called me a couple hours later and said, yeah, sorry. He goes, son number one barbecued all day yesterday and then came over and watched football with me last night. So I was tired. But he was referring to Jacob Green. So Jacob's in there, Ray Childress, Bucky Richardson, Dat Wynn, Darren Lewis, Greg Hill. I mean, there's so many. Those guys, I mean, he has so many guys that are close. Dante Hall, Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn. I mean, he had so many guys that were great football players and great kids. And I'll say this, I'm naming the guys that were great football players. There's so many people that weren't great that we don't know their name that he still keeps up with today. Monthly and weekly, he keeps up with people that he just loved. I mean, I can't say it's kind of like having kids. I don't know that he had a favorite, but he loved so many of them for different reasons, right?
Yeah, that's the question no parent.
Well, yeah, and I don't think any of us have kids, but I know I have two, and I love some things about one of them more than the other. They can both drive me crazy. I love them enough sometimes you want to squeeze their head off. But
how old are they?
I have a 20-year-old daughter, Dylan Lee Slocum, and she's at A&M. She's a Zeta and at A&M, sophomore at A&M. And then I have Bubba Slocum, who's John Harvey II. And he is a sophomore he's a junior at A&M Consolidated, and he'll hopefully be an Aggie soon. So
absolutely. So how was your dad's parenting skills much of an influence on how you parent your kids, or is it like a whole new different world?
Having a dad that was a football coach, I had no margin of error. He was on me pretty good. And in my young age, I raised my children much the same way. And I was probably a little bit harder on them than their friends were. A few years ago, we were out at the ranch, and I got on Bubba, and my dad said, son, you ought to be a little sweeter to him. And I looked at him kind of like, you're crazy. And I said, do you remember how you raised me? And he said, maybe I should have been a little more gentle too. So he's still coaching me. He was on me, and I'm so blessed. My kids are both wonderful kids, but his discipline, it was passed down, but hopefully some of his tenderness in the old age is rubbing off too. I try to be as kind and generous to him as I can now. So he's definitely still coaching me in that aspect.
Well, I know he was in a lot of folks' prayers when he went through. Was it lymphoma? It was cancer.
He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Yeah, or non-Hodgkin's. Okay. Yeah, non-Hodgkin's.
How's he doing now?
He's great. He's all clear and great and playing golf, and he's amazing. He's 80 years old and still going to the ranch, and he hasn't slowed down a bit. It's crazy.
He still goes to the games, I would imagine.
Every game, never misses a game. Yeah, there is not an Aggie around that's more maroon blooded than he is. He loves it.
John Harvey, what is it like? I have not been to an A&M game. I'm Red Raider. Sorry.
It's all right.
What is it like now? Because to me, A&M has the George Strait concert, for example. I mean, the energy, I didn't go, unfortunately, but you could feel the energy just looking at the images on TV. So, but the games are like that too.
I'll say this, and I'm biased. I'm in the Colt. I wear my Aggie ring every day. So, but I've been to all the stadiums. I've been to games at all the stadiums. My brother being a coach, I've been places with him. So I've been to the USC, UCLA game, been to the Penn State, Michigan game, been to the Georgia, Florida game. I mean, I've been to a bunch of college football games. There is not an environment like Texas A&M. And I think, you can ask the ESPN guys, and we haven't won. I'll say this, our best part of our sports is the 12th man. It is unbelievable support and the atmosphere that's created at those games. It's Dad win. I'll say this, in all of the 90s, I think we lost one or two games at home. You can go back and check me on that, maybe 4 games. But there was a time in there where I think 2 different times we had the longest winning streak in the country. And a lot of that he contributes to the 12th man. When you came there, I saw Trevor Lawrence on an interview not long ago say that somebody asked him about the hardest crowd he ever played in front of, and he said Texas A&M. I saw a Mississippi State picture. It's not just football. It's at the baseball stadium, the basketball games. They're fanatics, and I love it. They love Texas A&M, and there's nothing like the 12th man.
Yeah, it looks like an incredible environment to be in. How many does that stadium hold? Is it 80,000 or something crazy?
Yeah, I think it's 106 or 107 now.
Man.
We went one year where it was more, so I was surprised this year. I thought the Texas game was going to be the biggest crowd, but it was the year after Johnny Manziel. They had done the East Side expansion, and I think it got to 109,000, and then it's back down 106, 107,000 now. It's the third. I think it's the third biggest stadium in the country.
Wow.
And it's wild. It's a great environment.
Yeah, it's a great spot. I was surprised in the last few years when we've worked in College Station how big it is.
Right.
How much
it's grown. We flew in yesterday and flew over town, and it's crazy how it's a different place. It's not the town I grew up in.
Well, it's not the town I used to go to the games when I was at Tech. I can assure you that. That's been a while. I wanted to backtrack a quick second, and I should have asked you this a minute ago, but I wanted to ask you, why do you think God brought you back?
I don't know. To shine His light, I hope. I pray every day that I can seek His will and shine His light. So I'm on His time. So, I think He'll be the judge of that when it's all over. But from what my choice in it, it's to shine His light and to tell people, there's so many hurting guys and women. There's so many hurting people out there, and I am in the process with a buddy of mine of we haven't done this yet, but we've thought about starting a ministry for hurting guys, because I think the burden of men, we're so manly and we don't talk about things, and we keep things balled up inside, and that's not, we need to find the peace and the grace that Jesus Christ gives us. And I hope, if I can just find one guy and help them understand that we don't have to be that guy all the time. We're made to be strong. We're made to be bold, but we're made to be in His image, which is very loving and very forgiving and very graceful. And I hope I'm back to shine His light, and how that is will be how He determines that. But certainly that's what I want it to be, is just to seek His will and to shine His light in whatever I can do.
Well, I'm certainly blessed to get to talk to you again and hear more of your story.
Well, thank you.
And I know it'll be an inspiration to everyone that's hearing it. Please tell your dad hi for me. I don't
I'll
know
do
if he'll
that.
remember me. I was the person sticking
no, he'll
his
certainly
face.
remember the episode, and he's grateful for you. You've been so wonderful to us. You thank you so much for the 1860 episode and the Poche's episode. We've loved those and enjoyed sharing time with you and your staff. And it's been wonderful for our business, so we can't thank you enough.
Well, it is my pleasure. And I want to be sure everyone goes to the restaurants. Both of them are totally different experiences. Poche is Cajun and laid back, and it's fabulous because Johnny's Cajun. And then 1860 is this fabulous Italian.
Right.
Wonderful, and it's pretty. It's a neat space. It
is. It's swanky and kind of modern, and yeah, they're both wonderful places, and Johnny, like I said, Johnny deserves all the credit. He's designed them both, and I promised him, Jeremy and I promised him, that we would fill them up the first time, and he had to keep people coming back, and he has. He's certainly fulfilled his obligation on that.
Yeah, well, there's a reason they go back. It's so good. I mean,
it is. It's good, and you don't leave hungry. He gives you so much food.
No, not at all. Well, I love talking to you. Thank you so much. And thanks for your patience in getting this to happen. I really do appreciate it.
No, anytime. And I hope I hope he's doing good. I hope he heals well and not a problem. And thank you for the opportunity. I love talking to you. So anytime we can help you, please let us.
Well, likewise, anything we can do from y'all on this end of the fence, let me know.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
John Harvey. All right. Thank you.
Get social with us. Follow us on Instagram at Goodtaste TV.